Krunker recently massively increased the maximum FOV that you can use in-game. So FOV, or field of view, stands for how much of the environment that you can see around you. Previously, the max FOV was around 120, and now it goes all the way up to 175. And it's not necessarily a benefit or advantage, but I did test around a bit on super high FOV, and it was super fun to be able to experience Krunker with that wide of FOV, because the vast majority of games don't support FOVs that high. So in this video, I'm going to try to answer the question, what is the best field of view? Not necessarily best overall, but best for you and your computer and your setup and your gaming preferences. Now, there is one traditional belief among various FPS games that a lower FOV gives you better aim and higher FOV is better for movement, but it's definitely an oversimplification. It's also not entirely true, because some gamers aim better with higher FOV, and it definitely depends on the game, it depends on the situation. I did some testing to see exactly how field of view works in Krunker, especially with these new options available to us. First, I'm going to explain how FOV works in Krunker in terms of the zoom level. I'll be covering image quality as well as frame rate, and also how it works in terms of mouse movement, does it affect sensitivity, stuff like that. So let's get started. First, I'll explain how it works in terms of the zoom level. So new slider goes from 60 all the way up to 175. Looks pretty crazy at 175. You can play on it, but not recommended. But even if you are playing at 175, if I aim down sights, notice how everything just becomes like way more zoomed in, and now it's normal, it's clear again. And then if I go down to 60 and aim down sights, it zooms in, but it doesn't seem like it zooms in as much. And here's 60 FOV versus 140 FOV while aiming down sights. So it's really clear that the zoom level of aiming down sights is dependent on your field of view. So it does matter. If you're at 60 FOV, you're gonna be even more zoomed in when you're aiming down sights. But if you're at 140, you're not gonna be as zoomed in as the 60, but the difference between being zoomed in and not zoomed in is gonna be a lot bigger. Here's a side-by-side comparison when you're not aiming down sights. So on the right side, you can see that the high FOV has a huge advantage when it comes to information, but things appear a lot further away, and also the high FOV has a bit of distortion, especially around the edges. In terms of the 360 distance, so that's the distance you have to move the mouse to make a 360 in the game. So playing on 60 FOV, it looks like this, and we'll use the can as a marker. Slide that over. Okay, so that's 60. And then I'm gonna bump it up. So starting at the keyboard, looking at the red siren, then we're gonna measure the 360 distance. So 360 distance, actually about exactly the same. But higher FOV generally feels like it's more sensitive compared to lower FOV. And you can think of this concept about stability. So if you look at the center of the screen on high FOV, notice how the objects don't move that much. But the side of your screen, when you make a turn, it changes a lot from where it was before. So your center vision is very stable, but your periphery is very unstable with high FOV. The perception of sensitivity is really important. So you may want to slightly turn down your sensitivity if you're increasing your FOV. To recap some of the pros and cons. So pros for low FOV is that you have a lot higher zoom level, so you have more pixels to work with when you're looking at a target from far away. There's a lot less distortion, so the image that you're looking at with low FOV is more true image of how it's supposed to look. And your ambient vision, so kind of like your peripheral vision, tends to be more stable. Higher FOV is going to have a bit higher stability in the center of your vision, but far less zoom level, but also a lot greater map awareness. But before we can decide what the best FOV is, there's a few more considerations, namely performance/frame rate, and also the perception of speed and movement. Now let's talk about performance and how your field of view affects your FPS. And upon my testing, it was pretty interesting because I really did not find any impact one way or the other. Everything was really close. There were situations where the high FOV was getting even better frame rates than the low FOV sometimes. So it's pretty interesting because unlike other games, it seems like Krunker's FOV does not have a big impact on your frame rate. Next topic is the perception of speed, so how fast the game feels. And higher FOV generally feels a lot faster because your ambient vision is a lot more engaged. There are a lot more things on the screen that are moving around. So if you look at like a speck on the ground, you can see how far and how quickly it moves to a different point in the screen. So basically more things are moving around and it just makes you feel like you're going faster, but not necessarily a good thing to feel like you're going fast. In fact, imagine you're playing on really low FOV and feel like you're going slow. Well, you might feel like you're going to want to speed up a bit more, so you'll end up going even faster than, say, if you were playing on higher FOV, but really this all just comes down to preference. I find it more fun to play at high FOV because it does feel like you're moving really fast, but the more important thing is higher FOV does give you better movement because it really lets you see the ground in front of you a lot more. At least for me, it was easier to control slide hopping, but probably wouldn't matter as much for a really good player who just knows the maps super well. Like if they know how to enter and exit around every corner, then having that additional field of view might not matter as much. But one thing that does really matter a lot is going to be screen size. So I'll explain how that factors into your field of view. So there's really two field of views going on. There's the human vision field of view, which is really wide. And then there's the screen and the game's field of view, which you can set with the slider and Krunker. Despite having a really wide field of view, the human vision really works best in the center. So with that in mind, it doesn't really make sense to go for a super extreme field of view like 150 because the information in the periphery of your screen, you're not really going to be able to pick up that easily. The other thing that matters is how far away you sit from the monitor, because closer you get, it's kind of like simulating having a larger screen. But our eyes are also only designed to focus at a certain distance. So basically the closer you sit to the monitor, the higher FOV that you can get away with, because those objects that were previously like really zoomed out are now more zoomed in as you sit closer to the screen. And for that reason, if you're playing on a smaller screen, you might actually have to use a lower FOV because there is that minimum distance in which you're able to look at a screen. So you can't just keep on making it bigger. And when you're getting down to really small screen sizes like a phone, you kind of want to have at least some minimum amount of pixels to be looking at an enemy at a certain distance. So in summary, smaller screen sizes can use smaller FOVs, and larger screen sizes can use higher FOVs, but it is really dependent on how close you sit to the monitor. If you're sitting close, you can get away with higher, and if you're further back, you might have to lower your FOV a bit. So how do you find the best FOV for you? You can do it in 3 steps. So the first is to experiment. The second is to narrow it down, and 3 is to refine. Starting with experiment, just test like really high FOV first, and then test really low FOV, because before going into it, I never thought I would actually be using FOV that high, because previously I wasn't even maxed out in terms of FOV, but I did learn a few things. And then after that, you want to narrow it down, so find a value in between those 2 numbers that feels comfortable to you. And then the third step is to refine. What this means is that you should be entering the numbers manually and not using the slider, because the slider is not as precise. The slider moves up and down in multiples of 5, but you can enter any number you want, so try that out. I also put together this chart that explains the pros and cons of having high versus low FOV all listed out, so you can pause the video here if you want to have a deeper look. For me personally, I was using FOV of 97 before, but after doing the testing, I'm going to be trying out FOV between 120 and 130. I did see an improvement in my movement, and I think that it does make sense to adjust your FOV to also cover weaknesses in your game. So maybe you're really good at movement and you want to refine your aim, then you may want to try a lower FOV. So hope this video has been helpful to you guys. I have an active giveaway going on right now, and it's in collaboration with Krunk Cartel. So check the description below. You can win a Krunket 1 or a ballistic knife. So thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe, use code PHILZ, and I'll see you guys next time.